No epic apocalyptic disaster film is complete without some behind-the-scenes shenanigans. Add in a sci-fi AI touch, and you can bet on the shooting being eventful, to say the least. The latest destructive film, Moonfall, brings all that and more. Even though it didn't do well at the box office, the effort of making it is super admirable. So come with us as we pull back the curtains and entertain ourselves with some BTS action. First up, unimaginable imagery. Roland Emmerich's a maestro when it comes to annihilation. Sci-fi movies such as The Day After Tomorrow, Tides, and Godzilla. And how can we forget the iconic 2012, which convinced us we'll not live to see the year 2013. There's a running joke that the director loathes Earth, so he ends up destroying it in every movie. He's got the expertise down in Moonfall. By adopting the moon as an artificial megastructure conspiracy, Roland had full creativity to add unimaginable imagery. As a result, we see tsunamis, gravity waves, devastation, and literally the moon falling. Emmerich believes in a balanced approach, taking practical effects along with CGI. That's why chaos ensues during shooting. Tents are flying, folks are flying, especially a poor boy that comes up twice in BTS footage. Once he dangles to the arm of the director showing what he wants, and then with his on-screen parents. The gravity of the situation aside, it all looks pretty hilarious, seeing people flailing around. Next, we have a ghost cat. The best part of the entire movie is probably Houseman, a conspiracy theorist, funny, underdog, and the owner of a cat named Fuzz Aldrin. How cute is that? Whenever a movie has an adorable cat, take our money, because we can't resist those furry paws. So what happens when we found out it wasn't real, or was it? That's confusing, because we stumbled upon footage of a ghost cat. John Bradley, aka Houseman, comes and sits in front of two big screens, typical conspiracist-like. Fake tapping some buttons, his screen lights up, but Mr. Aldrin catches his attention. Like an annoyed cat dad, he calls out a much-repeated complaint: use the litter box. However, from our behind-the-camera perspective, there is no cat. Johnny comes all peeved and picks up, well, nothing, or the imaginary cat. He sets it aside and discards the soiled newspaper. Perhaps that's just one of the practice takes and they do have a cat in the actual movie. Or maybe they added it via special effects. Man, these VFX make everything doubtful these days. So the cat was to be or not to be. Sadly, we may never know. And now, out of the window. The adventure of escaping through the window. Classic cinema move to get away, whether from a date, house owners, or special forces. However, we only see the scene once. The actors, they've to play an infinite escape game to give a flawless execution. That's gotta be tiring. In one such scene, Wilson's character has to exit from a window while trying to wear a jacket. The poor guy awkwardly climbs/falls out as per the scene's requirement. Ouch. Patrick even lets out an "oh in character, but we get it if he feels the same in reality. Emmerich then points out that there may be a leaf in the corner of the camera's frame. So, roll it again. That's just an example of why multiple retakes are important. Imagine having to fall out of a window again and again for a perfect shot. Must be banging. In an interview, Patrick Wilson mentions how it's the little things that are more painful as opposed to major injuries. You don't even expect to be hurt by them, but they mess you up bad. Acting to fall, having to fall again and again, and still look good doing it. We heard beauty is a pain, but looks like shooting is even more so. Next up, boats hit the roads. Want to show world annihilation without tsunamis? Not possible, friends. Huge waves plus destruction movies go side by side. Not gonna lie, as terrifying as they seem, they look massively magnificent on screen. But what happens when the water recedes? We rarely ever see the aftermath, much like we never see the poor street vendor being compensated after his cart is destroyed in a villainous chase. Moonfall lets in on how a city looks after being ravaged by a tsunami. Destroyed cars, buildings, properties, and an interesting addition, yachts. That's actually pretty smart thinking. Waves would definitely drop all the sea supercars on land. Seeing them being transferred to the roads was a fascinating watch. Carried on a truck, a yacht is placed strategically to look like it was dumped there. Fake it till you make it? Sounds about right. Extras, or probably the general public, had an interesting day seeing big boats hit the road. We sure did appreciate an inside view. Now we have lots of floating. Speaking of boats, we see loads of floating in the movie. Not the water kind, the lack of gravity kind. Seeing actors portraying astronauts in space, we never think they're acting. It's just ingrained in us that no gravity means slow-mo, but they're not really in space. The BTS footage gives us a great reminder of how the cast is actually moving their limbs painfully slow. Attached to a crane arm-like harness, they look like they're floating if we don't see the machine holding them up. Wilson sheds some light on shooting the zero-gravity scenes, saying it's tough. Real astronauts tell that in space, your arms limply come up to your chest, but if we saw that, it would look so weird. That's why actors have to create a balance of what looks natural on the screen but still follows the real effects of gravity. That's a challenge, but the leads, Brian and Joe, effortlessly pull it off. Apart from floating, there's also a lot of lugging and tugging. The stars are attached to some setups so they can't pull themselves ahead when in a spaceship's narrow aisle. To show that, they're usually just pushed and pulled by a crew member. Tug of war, but one-sided. This is quickly becoming a real opener about how much movie stars have to bear. Up next is the space rides. However, shooting space scenes can have some perks. It can be like taking a ride on Space Mountain at Disneyland, especially those blast-off scenes showing the real thrust speed. Movies make a proper space cabin to execute that. Since Moonfall had NASA expertise behind it too, it made a realistic-looking space car that rumbles and tumbles. Our leads Halle Berry and Patrick Wilson took a trip in it, decked in their astronaut uniforms. The car/spaceship moves to reflect the tremors and later picks up speed as the scene becomes intense. The actors look like they're having a jolly good time, fake commandeering a rocket. In separate scenes, John Bradley joins them in on the fun, providing some comic relief in an otherwise grave scene. What's more, a few crew members also had to bear the shudders to do some in-filming. Sadly for them, they aren't held by a seatbelt, so they have to stabilize themselves and make sure the scene carries out as visioned by the director. The creators of the fake shuttle deserve applause for their masterful rendering too, because it was extremely convincing. How about they start giving out rides in it to make up for the movie's box office plunge? Too soon to joke about that? Sorry folks. And finally, making waves. We've mentioned tsunamis before in this video, but we have to talk about how they were created. Special effects can make up the landscape of disastrous scenes, but what about when the main leads are caught in it? It can't just be shooting in a pool and calling it an ocean. No offense, Titanic. You have to take a dunk to give us some action. Bradley's houseman didn't just take a dunk. He had to face a huge wave head on, and believe us, that requires some nerves. Maybe Game of Thrones gave him that wild courage because the crew had nothing but praise for John. This scene had the hero look out the window seeing the gushes of water approach them. Yes, Moonfall uses a lot of cliche movie tropes, and now everyone runs upstairs to save themselves. Would that save you if you can already outrun the tsunami? We'll have to watch a How to Survive episode for that. Anyway, Brian rushes everyone, but Houseman looks a little too starstruck, or should we say, soon to be wave-struck. Suddenly, the water bursts in, completely submerging Bradley, and that was terrifyingly entertaining to watch. Even John says seeing water approach, knowing you have to take it head-on, is nerve-wracking. But we've got to say the professional actor gave an impeccable performance. You can take a man out of Game of Thrones, but never the warrior out of him. You know everything, Sam Tarley. That's a wrap on today's video. Which blooper or BTS scene impressed you the most? Tell us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next one.